Hello everyone and welcome to this week's video tutorial. This will be a continuation of the opening series on the left riverbank horse variation. The full name of the opening is Central Cannon with pawn rank Chariot versus Green Horse Defense with left riverbank horse variation. Yeah, it's quite a lengthy name, and unfortunately that is the way things are in Xiangqi. Before I forget, I would like to express my gratitude to Grandmaster Zhang and Master Wenqing for allowing me to use their material to make this video. And as a side note, for the left riverbank horse opening, there's one treatise that was written by Grandmaster Dianzhong, who is Master Wenqing's Shifu, and this is the biggest and most important book for this opening system. And it's a very respectable one also. Although it was written back in the 1980s, sorry. Uh, it is still very popular now and still often read. Okay, so without further ado, let us continue with today's lesson. Central Cannon, 7-pawn advancement, and this would be the pawn rank Chariot. Now, before I forget, in the opening classification, this would belong to the 7-pawn advancement opening variations in the Green Horse Central Cannon versus Green Horse Defense opening system, and the left riverbank horse. Now, red to counter to prevent black from playing h6 plus 4, red will usually play h8 plus 6, and red will counter e3 plus 5. In the previous board, we discussed p5 plus 1, whereby red would attack from the central file, as would be uh, as would be uh, uh, as will be important because the central cannon, the main idea behind the central cannon was to attack the central file all along. But after years of playing, a new variation appeared in the 1970s and 80s. This would be the high left cannon variation. This started earliest, it was most earlier seen in 1960. In the 1960s, and gradually became very popular in the 1970s and 80s. Now, an even older method of attack was to play c8 plus 2, because this would target the pawn over here to prevent. Unfortunately, this would not be a good idea because black would simply push the pawn forward again, targeting the chariot over here, forcing the um, chariot to move away. p7 plus 1, forcing a trade of pawns whereby black would be prepared to storm this flank. Usually red would be forced to retreat the horse, and black will retreat his horse also. Now black could be prepared to attack this flank. The issue of the pawn has not been resolved, and black would now have h4 plus 3 to go for a checkmate. So black would have a very flexible formation, and it was very difficult for red to control this situation. So that was why this variation gradually fell out of favor. And instead, to counter the possible effects of this pawn reaching red's pawn rank, red would play c8 plus 1 for the high left cannon variation. This is called Gao Zuo Pao in Chinese. So high left cannon variation was quite successful and very effective against the left riverbank horse variation. And it was so successful that back in the 1970s, I think, I cannot remember, this was the preferred method of play against the left riverbank horse variation. Now, this would also be the topic of discussion for today. So, faced with red's high left cannon variation, there were three major variations that were discussed for black. The first would be p7 plus 1, the second would be a4 plus 5, and the third would be c2 plus 1. So let us begin with the first variation. So red will continue to push p7 plus 1 as planned, and this should be, of course, the topic of discussion since this was black's plan all along. So what would happen if p7 plus 1 were played? Now, it would be advised for red to retreat the chariot to attack the horse in this manner. Now, in the past, r2 equals to 4 was played, and black can counter with h6 plus 3. So the advantage of this improvisation would be that again, red will still apply a pin to this chariot and cannon, and as I mentioned before in the previous video, now one of the key factors to determine if red had a successful opening was the ability of this chariot to limit the effectiveness of these two pieces, because only one piece was already pinning two major black pieces in the same file. And conversely, the ability of black to get these two pieces into action will determine if his opening was successful or not. And faced with at this point in time, the recommended move would be r2 minus 1. So now, let us see what would happen if red played r2 equals to 4 to try to shoo away or dislodge the black horse. Okay, as mentioned earlier, black would simply counter with h6 plus 7, and at this point in time, there will be two major subvariations. The first of which will be c5 equals to 6. The second will be c5 equals to 4. Now, the idea behind c5 equals behind these two moves that red will want to adjust his formation and prevent the black horse from capturing the central cannon, while black would be free from the pin and he will be now able to go. These two pieces will now be able to attack. So in the first subvariation, c5 equals to 6 was played, and red would immediately pounce on the chance to try to trade material. So e7 plus 5, of course red would not want to do that. Cannon jumps into action, preparing to traverse to this side of the board. Red tries to attack, blocking the elephants, so an obvious target will be the elephant over here. And black takes the central elephant by force, and after sacrificing a horse, he will now concentrate 1, 2, 3 pieces ready to storm this flank. So this black's prospects would look very rosy. Now, because of black's c8 equals to 5, another variation, c5 equals to 4 was played, so that black would not have to worry about c8 plus 5, and red would also have to play will also have the option of capturing the advisor if need be. So if this was the second subvariation, now if this were played, red would immediately move his develop his other chariot as a ranked chariot. Now red would target the pesky pawn and the horse over here, and black will go for a trade of material, protecting the cannon, and a very nice move over here, c8 r8 plus 1. Again, once the chariots were linked, the cannon will now be freed from any potential pin by the red chariot. So there is the line of thinking behind this move, capturing the pawn. And as can be seen, black is still determined to storm this flank and offers a trade of chariot. And after earlier, it would seem that this would be a loss of material for black, but this was actually a pseudo sacrifice. And after the pseudo sacrifice, black would claim back lost material and be able to attack this flank as planned, and he will have the better prospects ahead. So as can be seen, this is a very complicated situation. So black can be satisfied with this situation. There was a sub-variation that I forgot to add earlier. Uh, after playing c2 equals to 4, h6 plus 7, a third sub-variation would be for red to try to play r4 equals to 3 to target the pawn and horse immediately. Now, since it was under attack, red will simply trade material, and if, again his pin would be freed, and at this point in time the situation on the board has calmed down and it will be a roughly even situation. Black can be satisfied with this situation. Black can grudgingly accept it, uh, and the pace of the pace of the game will have slowed down greatly. So a short recap: variation c5 equals to 6, c5 equals to 4, and r4 equals to 3 if red played r2 equals to 4. So now the recommended or improvised move would be to play r2 minus 1, whereby red would keep his pin on this chariot, although it will appear to be a waste of one move. But because of the positioning of the pieces, this is more than compensated, as black would have to return the favor, so as to say, as he would have to try other ways to attack. So at this point in time, it will be advisable for black to try to trade horses so early in the game. Now this would be the sound move. It would not be a good idea to try to keep the material on the board with say h6 plus 7, thinking that the chariot will be under attack and the pawn might have a chance of crossing the river. And at this point in time, we can see the effects or the advantages of playing the high left cannon variation over here, because the pawn rank will be guarded. So let's say if this move were played, red will retreat his chariot. Black would gain a pawn that crossed the river, but red would simply offer to trade material again and free the horse from any potential trouble. And by sacrificing this pawn, the cannon will now be protecting the chariot, and red could still continue his bind. And after doing so, after capturing, again the issue of the black pawn would how black would deal with the issue of the black pawn remains to be seen, and red would have the initiative because the pawn had made 1, 2, 3, 4 moves so early in the game, and red will have the initiative in this situation. Hence, it would have been better for uh, black to simply trade material. And of course, red would usually refuse to trade material. If he traded material, the pin would be lost, and this pawn would wreak havoc on red's palace. Sorry. h3 minus 5. Again, at this point in time, black would retreat his horse, and after the pawn had crossed the river, red would now try to trade chariots. Now, this is a safe and reliable counter. Now, another possible line to play would be to play r1 plus 1. And red could usually continue with playing h7 plus 6 or r2 equals to 3, etc. And this would lead to another very sharp and intense subvariations, whereby both colors would be attacking. So this was not recommended in the book, but it was just mentioned as a passing comment. So by offering to trade chariots, black would be able to control the situation better. Again, red would play r2 equals to 3, high chariot to protect horse, attempting to apply a cannon pin to gain material, but red would not have any of it. It would be prepared to trade material. So red will use the cannon to block the cannon again. This is a commonly used tactic. Black plays c2 equals to 4, trying to control this red file and also to allow for development of the chariot. Red captures the pawn, and he also allow the cannon will now be able to protect the horse. and the situation on the board has calmed down. Red would have to deal with the issue of the central horse and the development of the left chariot. Or black, although he would have a uh, congested position, he could play r1 plus 1, r1 equals to 2, etc., etc., etc. to develop. So the pace of the game has slowed down considerably, and the next confrontation will be probably decided in the middle game. So this is variation 1, whereby p7 plus 1, variation A, whereby p7 plus 1 was played. Now in variation B, a4 plus 5 was discussed, whereby black would try to develop his chariot, his right chariot, early in the game with r1 equals to 4. Now red will attack the horse, allowing the horse to black will protect the horse in this manner, and red will try to gain material by sacrificing the pawn. Now maybe the authors suggested c8 equals to 7 as a new or more innovative way of playing this position. Black will counter the high cannon of his own. Red will try to capture the cannon, and black will counter in this manner. They're very aggressive, sacrificing the cannon. So usually red will move his chariot away. Now what would happen if he captured the chariot? Now black could now jump both horses to the riverbank, threatening this chariot, and also p3 plus 1 to storm this flank to threaten this chariot. So black will follow with p3 plus 1 to fight for the initiative. So that is why capturing the cannon is not an option, and it would be better for red to retreat his chariot. And this will become a standoff for both colors. And this is very interesting and very explosive position. And again, it will be too hard to say who would have this clear advantage. Now, this was the innovation that was suggested. Now back to the main line. p3 plus 1 is usually suggested, or is one of the more commonly used tactical themes in similar situations. And black will counter with p3 plus 1. Obviously, he cannot afford to capture, or he will lose material. Capturing the pawn. Again, black will now slowly concentrate more and more material on this flank, and red would move the horse to the river, and black will start to attack. Again, black sacrifices material, but with this move, he is prepared to play r8 equals to 6 to threaten to capture the advisor and also pin these two material. And if there's also the possibility, because of the cannon here, red can only play a6 plus 5 to defend, and if need be, he can play r8 equals to 7 to threaten to for the spotted cannon checkmate. So again, this will become a very complicated situation, and black would sacrifice material for an attack on this empty flank. Generally speaking, most Xiangqi authors would suggest that this would be a divided situation. Black will be attacking, but red would have a material advantage. And the key issue now would be how red can resolve black's attack. If he were able to do so, the material advantage will become significant later on. So that is why a4 plus 5 is sometimes seen. But as this variation continued to evolve, the more commonly used counter in this situation will be to play c2 plus 1, whereby black will counter with the high cannon of his own, threatening to target the red chariot. Now this was an innovation that was that first appeared in the 1980s. So faced with this position, faced with the threat of black playing p3+1 to attack the chariot and storming this flank, there are two variations. R2 equals to 4 would allow or threaten to capture the black horse. Another would be to play R2 minus 5 to move the chariot to safety, but obviously this would not be a good idea because Red had just advanced his chariot and now retreated. Now this would be a loss of tempo, and again this will allow give Black opportunities to free himself of the pin. So Black will usually free himself in this manner: C2 minus 2, and preparing to storm this flank. And at this point in time, Black will be in a dilemma. If he advanced again, now Black's pieces will be very formidable. So and he has much more potential for growth. So generally speaking, Black would have a better time ahead. So R2 equals to 4 is suggested. P3+1, sacrificing the horse. And Red will try to charge the central pawn forward. This will be an attempt to increase the initiative, as Red was prepared to offer a counter sacrifice at any time now. Now, would it be a good idea? So, what would happen if Red did not move the central pawn forward and instead tried to save material, but let's say playing c8 minus 2, whereby he could also try to attack or add pressure on this flank. Black would simply push p3+1 forward. Now, Red will usually offer counter sacrifice, trying to develop material. It would not be a good idea to play h7 minus 5 because, as can be seen, although Black had sacrificed a piece, Red's material were closed and cramped. So this will not be very ideal. Instead, it would be better for Red to offer a counter sacrifice, but Black would not want to accept it so early in the game. So say c8 equals to 7. Black would try to shoo the chariot away, retreating the chariot, and now Black would still protect the pawn and refuse to budge. Let's say if Black retreated the chariot, Black will now develop this chariot. So as can be seen, although Black had sacrificed a major piece, all the black pieces have an open position, are in the open, and there are many more options for Black to attack later on. One possible attack would be, say, h2 plus 4, etc. This would be an optimistic situation for Black. So that is why c8 minus 2 or attempting to protect material would not be a good idea, and Red tries to go on offensive with a p5+1, preparing to offer a counter sacrifice if need be. And of course, Black would try to claim back lost material. And again, as mentioned earlier, Red would now offer a counter sacrifice with h7 plus 5. Now, the issue of the pawn, which piece should attack? Should it capture the cannon immediately and allow the house, or allow Red to mount an attack on the central file? Or let's say if he captured the cannon, so after counter sacrificing a piece, there'll be 1 2 3 4 sorry 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5. So both material have both colors have the same material, but as can be seen, Red's position is now in the open. He's threatening to capture the black cannon and go for the elbow horse attack, etc. So Red would have the initiative. And this pawn, which is rather far away from the palace, will still not be able to do much for the time being. So that is why Red would choose to attack this horse in this manner. and black would attack from the central file, capturing the horse, attempting to capture the central pawn. And as can be seen, this would basically be a rather even situation. So the situation, the material has been traded, and at this point in time, the situation is relatively calmed down, and it will be basically an even position. A short recap: in today's board, we were discussing red's c8 plus 1 or the high left cannon variation. This is a very famous variation and an important line in this opening system. There are three major counters: p7 plus 1, a4 plus 5, and c2 plus 1. In the first variation, black would be able to hold his own. It would still be a rather even situation, but the pace of the game had come down. In variation B, a4 plus 5, black will sacrifice material to go for an attack. In the last variation, black will counter red with a high cannon of his own, giving red a taste of his own medicine, so as to say. So this would become the most popular counter in later on. So again, there are many complicated possibilities, but if both colors played to their best, it will reach a rather even situation. So there will be still many opportunities for both colors, but now the test of skill will be in the mid game or the endgame phase. So I hope you have enjoyed this short video tutorial. I'm trying to keep the videos as short as possible, but this is a very complicated opening system, and I hope you like the work that I've been doing. If you do, please give me a like and subscribe to my channel so that I can help your game more. Thank you and have a nice week ahead.